God. It is to say that there is a foundation for the pleasure of God. Without faith, it is impossible to please God. Without faith, it is impossible to please God. However, this does not mean that the way to you are in a relationship and you strive by the power of God, by discipline, by the power of your will, to ensure that this relationship is chaste and pure on that faith in order to please God. Are you following me? Yes. So the point is that the apostle says, we taught you, you received of us how you ought to walk and how you ought to please God. Now, if you did a conference and the title of the conference is How to Please God, and you come, you say, how to please God, number 1, and you give people a list of 12 things, many people will say you are legalistic. Meanwhile, this is what the apostle did. Are you here? Yes, that's what the apostle did. In the same way, we can teach you how to fear God. How to fear God. One of those days, I think I was studying or something, I was praying, I'm not sure. Many times I don't know the difference between both of them. So we just used to do them, unless there is a special. Anyway, so I was spending time with the Lord, let me put it like that. I was spending time with the Lord. And then the Lord said something to me. He said that most times I come here, I dishonor him. I say, Daddy, Abba. What did I do? He said that the way I use my phone in his presence dishonors him. I said, but I don't. He said, from time to time, you check your WhatsApp. He said, is it that he's boring? I'm telling you, this I was just like, until as he kept talking, I just started apologizing. So is it that he's boring? That if I was talking with somebody else and the person noticed that I was checking my WhatsApp, what would the person think? He said, if you have come to me, give me attention. And that every time I come to him and I do not give him the maximal attention, what I'm doing is I'm dishonoring him. And you see, if the presence of God is important to you, those kinds of rebukes will be valuable for you. So I said, I'm sorry. I have learned. I'm sorry. There is how to fear God. Do you follow me? Now, every time God does something, the end of what God does, the end in the hearts of men of the activity of God is meant to produce his fear. Every time God does something, every time God does a miracle, an intervention, something, the end of that thing is meant to produce his fear in the hearts of men. It is not just, it is not just the case. So, because, go back to Isaiah. Let me show you part of what I'm talking about. So, in Isaiah chapter 8, verse 11, it said, the Lord said to me, by a strong hand, do not say a conspiracy, what these people call a conspiracy. Next verse, verse 12. Neither fear ye their fear, nor be afraid. Verse 13. Sanctify the Lord of hosts. The word sanctify means to set apart. That's what it means. To sanctify means to put in a special place. To put in a special place. For example, this is a hall, right? And this hall, as big as it is, even if it is empty, there are certain events that cannot hold in this hall. It doesn't matter, I believe, it doesn't matter the amount you bring to rent the hall. If you come and say, the exco of the fellowship, please, Davido is coming to town and the place we wanted to use is booked, so we just want to use this place for VIP. You see, the reason why the executives of the fellowship that has this place will not agree is not because they don't need money. They need money, I know. The reason why they will not agree is because this hall has been set apart, has been sanctified. Are you here? This hall has been made holy. This is the idea of the word to sanctify. It means to make holy. It means to set apart. It means, therefore, that the moment something is sanctified, there is restricted access to the thing. There is restricted access. There is restricted use because of recognized value. Are you here? Are you guys here? So when he says, sanctify the Lord of hosts, what he's saying is that in your heart, there is a space that God needs to occupy. And that space that God needs to occupy is not a space that he occupies coincidentally. This is something that you do intentionally. Intentionally. You do it intentionally and give him a place that nothing else has. Are you here? The beautiful thing about it is that he says, sanctify the Lord of hosts, so that you can see that what he is speaking about here, the expression of God's person that he's speaking about here, is the warrior dimension of God. Which, of course, would make sense if you read Isaiah chapter 8, like I said you should do yesterday, because the whole context is a war context, right? So he says, do not be afraid of these people. Don't be afraid. This whole thing is Assyria, basically, right? Don't be afraid of their fear. Don't be afraid of their armies. What you will do is sanctify the Lord of hosts. Set him apart in your heart. And when you do that, let him be your fear and let him be your dread. Meanwhile, it is not only the Lord of hosts, let me use the word, it's not only the Lord of hosts dimension that is meant to inspire fear in your heart. Because every dimension of God you see should lead you to fear. The psalmist says in Psalm 130 that if thou markest iniquities, O Lord, who will stand? But there is forgiveness with you, that you may be feared. And for a long time, I didn't get it. How is it that when God forgives, the outcome is fear? How is it that when God forgives, the outcome is fear? The answer is actually that every time God does something divine, what God does is that God deposits something of his glory in your heart. When men see it, the proper response, if all is well, is that they will fear him. And this is part of the things that the Lord is hunting for on the face of the earth. Because as you can see, like I said yesterday, there are two words for fear here. There is fear, there is dread, right? And the first word for fear is reverence, is awe, is actually a way to talk about the fact that men see that he deserves worship. That's actually what that fear is, reverence. It's honor, it's extreme honor. Right? It's reverence. That's what it is. So that every time God does something, every time God acts, if you see it, you are supposed to say, God. Are you following? Yes. There should be something of the honor of God that is born in your heart if you see something that God did. And sometimes, actually, the Lord actually said to me on Sunday night, he will do things that will make you fear. Yes, don't worry. So sometimes God actually does. Let me give you an example. I went to preach in one campus a couple of months ago. And while I was preaching, so I was done preaching, and it was a miracle night, so we were praying for the sick and all of that. So a number of people had come out to testify that they could see without their glasses and all of that. And then a lady walked from the back and she came to the front and she was crying. And when she was crying, I felt she had a very serious miracle. So I went and gave her the mic. What has God done for you? And she said, God has not done anything. That in fact, how can all these people be healed and she is not healed? So I collected the mic quickly. So I collected the mic and I was walking. And as I was walking, the Lord said I should tell her that her eyes would be healed. So I told her, I said, your eyes will be healed. Her problem was she couldn't look into light. That was her issue. And she had this issue from when she was a child. She couldn't look into light. In fact, everybody knew her because she was she's one of the most dedicated people in the fellowship. So they knew her. that this lady cannot look into light. So there were a couple of other people that I was praying for. Now, this is when God wants to put fear. These are the kinds of things he does. There were a couple of people that I was praying for. So I was praying, they had issues in their eyes. So when she came out, some other people came out too. To say, if people can come out to say, it's not testimony that brought them, it's need. So me say if I go come out. So some other people came out. So I was praying for them, laying hands on them. And then the lady started shouting. Now the cry changed. So I beg, we'll come back to this lady, And then she started saying, I can see the light, I can see the light, I can see the light. So all of us went, what is going on? You know what this lady did? You know these stage lights? There was one on the stage. She carried it and she put her eye inside. She was looking at, and I'm like, don't spoil it. They just arranged this for you. Don't spoil it just now. The beautiful thing is I never prayed for her. Are you following me? Yes. 1 week later, the campus fellowship president sent me a video. The lady did a video by herself. And she narrated the story and said, all of you know me. And she was still thanking God. Now you see, when God wants to do things that cause fear, he does those kinds of things. That there are things in scripture that are called notable miracles. Oh, yes, it's beautiful that you had ulcer, you don't have the ulcer again. But the impact of the ulcer healing miracle is not the same as a blind man that saw. It's not the same. It's not. Have you noticed that in the ministry of Jesus, those were the things that were magnified? Do you think Jesus did not heal headache and stomach pain and hormonal conditions? He did. But the things that were magnified in his ministry were the things that people can see and know that something happened here. And if anybody is a minister, we need to contend for visible. Hello? Yes. If somebody is AS, let the genotype be changed. I love it. I believe it so much. I'm saying that in addition to that, God needs to give us visible things, the type that can be seen, confirmed on the spot. There is something that he does to the hearts of men. Fear grips them. Fear grips them. That same weekend, somebody came. The guy couldn't wear his slippers well because he had an accident a few years ago and one of his bones were sticking out. Not like it had affected, his leg was deformed. So when he put his leg inside the slippers, it couldn't go in well because of the bone. So people came out, I laid hands on him, laid hands on other people. I didn't even know until the guy came and said he can wear his slippers. Where did the bone go to? When God wants people to fear, those are the kinds of things that God does. And I'm saying to you that every activity of God is meant to bring the people who see it and know him into fear. This is the reason why God does not only show his acts, he also shows his ways. You see where I'm going in a bit. It is the case that many people see the acts of God and they take the acts of God and run away. Meanwhile, every time God acts, there is something else that he's saying. If God heals somebody, if someone is sick and God healed the person, there are many things that God can be saying by that. One of the things that God can be saying is that he's a compassionate God. And so because of his compassion, he heals the sick. When words of prophecy comes forth, many times, there are people, in fact, I remember someone that I gave a word, I was ministering and I said something, and, gave the word to the lady, and the lady was crying unnecessarily. Until after the meeting, I asked her, what's the issue? Because she was still crying. Like, even me, it was not that deep. And her issue was that she felt God had forgotten her. So when that word came, it came to remind her that God can see her in her condition. God can see her. Are you following me? Are you here? Every time that God does something, there is something that God is saying by what he does. So just like, what's her name? Hagar said, I know that you are the God that sees me. Sometimes that's what the prophetic ministry does. It makes people to realize that God sees them. The power ministry makes people to realize that God is compassionate, God is loving. And intelligent believers, every time God does a miracle, we look beyond the miracle to hear what he is saying. I was talking to you about Moses yesterday. I used him as an example. When Moses picked the rod, the first thing that God said to him was, throw your rod down. It turned into a snake. He picked it by his tail. The next thing was, put your hand into your bosom. When he removed it, it was leprous. When he put it back, then God said to him that if they do not hearken to the voice of the first sign, you see, because signs have voices. If they do not hearken to the voice of the first sign, so that when Moses got to Egypt and Moses put his rod down and the other people put their rods down and his snake swallowed their snakes, it was not a superiority match. God was not trying to show that I'm bigger than you. No, it means that there is something that this miracle is saying. There is something it is saying. People who are outsiders may miss it. Believers cannot. Because this is part of the way that God puts his fear in your heart. And I was saying to you yesterday that if you fear God, you will not fear other things. Huh? Hello? How do I say this nicely? There are some of your fears that you have that is an insult to God. It's almost as though you should know better than that. Now, it's almost as though you should know better than that. So, for example, you were in 100 level, you didn't have school fees, you lost both your parents, you just came to school, you didn't know how to walk, and somehow, supernaturally, God provided for you, your fees, everything. You graduated from the university. When you graduated from the university, you now got a job. And when you got the job, you now had this, you got a house and all of that. Then somehow, you lost your job. And after you lost your job, you had to pay house rent and you became afraid. It's a sign that when you were in the university, you were not learning. Because if you learned, you will realize that man does not live by bread alone. For those 4 or 5 years you were in the university and you were surviving on the mercy of God, you were supposed to be trained into the kind of person that will not fear when there is a financial problem. If you fear, it's because you didn't learn your lessons. And the reason why you fear that lack is because you don't fear God. There is no reverence for the one that provided when it didn't look like anything could happen. Are you following me? So you need to investigate your miracles and learn lessons from those miracles, because they will form something in your heart that protects you from fear. Every time you fear and the object of your fear is not God, is a sign that you do not know him enough. It's a sign that you have not studied his works enough. It's a sign that you have not gone beyond his acts to know his ways. And I'm saying that it may pass for unbelievers, but for children of God, it does not pass. The first Festival of Lights that we did, we're not even 1 year in ministry, and then we're going to do this conference. So, because I'm a planner, I plan a lot. I'm a planner. So I had known where we're going to do the conference. We're going to do the conference in June. By January, we had gone to the hall that we wanted to use, and then they had told us the bill. So we told them that we don't have all the money to pay you. So what we will do is we'll be paying monthly in installments, 6 months. So break this cost into 6 months. So we're paying like that. Every month we'll pay a fee, we'll pay a fee, we'll pay a fee. So that's what we're doing. As we got to the conference, like a month to the conference, money just stopped entering our account. Now, that was an anomaly. There is no day that money doesn't enter our church account. Even if it's 100 naira. And 100 naira, 200 enters a lot. Hello? Yes, because 70% of my people are students. So it happens a lot. But there's no day that money doesn't enter church account. It's not possible. Now, on the first day, money didn't enter. I noticed. On the second day, money didn't enter. On the third day, money didn't enter. I say, it's an attack. It's an attack. Something is going on here. And by the way, in case you don't know, if you decide to stand for God, part of the things that Satan will want to attack is your finances. Hello? Yes. Let me tell you the truth. If you are standing for God in the land, purity, righteousness, pray well for your finances. Satan cannot make you sin, but he can make you broke. Hello? People don't like, I should not talk about it. Sorry, I will. I don't know if it was not you I was telling. One of those days like that, our finances came under attack. Somebody was supposed to send us money from another country. She went and delivered the money to the guy. The guy was going to go post the money at the bank. And this money was money that, you people don't know. When pastors are preparing for a conference, it's God we are looking to, but we know how. Sometimes we know the channel. And sometimes God just allows us to be foolish like that. So this person had said she was going to send this amount of money, but because she was not in the country, she couldn't send it. But there's this friend of hers who is in Nigeria, so she gave the money to the guy, all of that. This guy was going to post the money at the bank. He had an accident that required that he was unconscious for 2 months. They play. See, Satan, like I said, Satan cannot make you sin. But he can attack your finances. He can. If you are standing for God, pray well for your finances. Hello? Yes. Fast for your finances. Pray for your finances. Let it be that there is no space anywhere for Satan to enter. So, by the way, that thing happened that week. The person had the accident. There was another person I was supposed to make a trip. There was another person who was trying to help me process my visa. She had an accident too. Now you see, when something happens once, twice, you know that a spirit is doing something. So that's how the money didn't come. No money in the church account for a week. So we started praying. I didn't tell my guys. I just took it up by myself. I was praying, fasting, and praying, fasting, and praying, fasting, and praying. And one day, there were bills that were supposed to pay, and it was so much, and there was no money. So that night, in my prayer, I can never forget, because in fact, I had prayed, but then I came to sleep. But I couldn't sleep. So I sat on the bed, and I said, oh God, I hope I have not beaten more than I can chew. And as soon as I heard it, I heard the voice of the Lord loud in my spirit. He said, you have not beaten more than I can chew. Now you see, when God spoke like that, it came, I don't know how to say it, but it came with fear. I apologized. Yes. You see, it's one thing, one instant you are anxious, the other instant you are apologizing for your stupidity. And nothing changed. There was no alert. It was the word that came. As that word came into my spirit, I realized I was a fool. I said, Kai, this boy don't have sense. Is it not this God? You see, this is where testimonies help. This is why you need to have a compendium of testimonies. Hello? Because everything that God does is actually saying something. It's saying something. It's saying something. It's saying something. That night I slept. When I slept, I had a dream. And in the dream, I saw somebody come to meet me. Somebody I respected. And the person looked at me. I said, what do you need all this money for? What do you need all this money for? And I said, sir, it's for the conference. And the person was angry. He was angry. And he walked away. When I woke up from that dream, I knew that we had won. When that day I woke up from that dream, that morning, somebody sent 200 naira into the account. And I knew that the siege was broken. You know what allowed me to win that night? Was that the word that God said, it came with his voice. And because I recognized it, his fear rose again in my heart and anxiety died. By the way, you cannot receive anything from God with anxiety. Are you following? Yes. If you have a problem of anxiety because there is an issue, God is not going to solve that problem. What God will do is solve the anxiety problem. Are you here? Yes. Oh, I'm so worried. I don't know how it will happen. You are postponing the miracle. Because at that point, God's position is, let us put our son at peace. That's the principle in Philippians chapter 4. Be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication, make your request known unto God. And God will answer the request. Is that what he says? No. And the peace of God will guard your heart. That's the moment there is anxiety, the first thing that he will need to quench is that anxiety. That worry will need to lift. And part of the reasons why we come into fear, we have anxiety, we have worry, is because we did not meditate on his works. If we did that, what would have happened is that we would have seen the hand behind the works. And all of a sudden, a fear of God rests upon your heart again. Everything that God does is supposed to lead you to fear him. And by fear now, I'm talking about reverence. There is an awe for God that you should have. Are you following me? Now, saying to you that it's very possible that unbelievers may not see it. But if you're a child of God, instructed in the things of the kingdom, it cannot be the case that you function at their level. Are you here? Yes. It cannot be the case that you function at their level. Every time God does something, you need to look beyond what he did to find what he's saying. If you do that, you will notice that you will be growing in God and fear will be losing guard over your heart. There are times that people ask me and say, this thing that you are doing, you get faith, you get faith. I say, no, I don't have faith like that. I have just seen that God cannot fail. I've seen it too much that there is no other reality that makes sense to me. It's not about whether you are a great man of faith. That's not the point. The point is the things that God has done. Have you looked at them long enough to hear what he's saying by them? Did you hear the voice of the sign? If you hear it, you should fear. When God forgives your iniquities, it's actually meant to bring you into another reverence for him. You see, because the truth is, he doesn't have to. When the psalmist wrote that psalm, in Psalm 130, there was no sacrifice of Jesus yet. And so what he was talking about was the benevolence of God, the way that God expresses mercy, the way that God expresses faithful love, loving kindness, the way he expresses. Hello? If that's how he has no choice. He has no choice. Now, this is strong language. God has no choice, right? It's strong language. That's exactly why you should fear him. Because it tells you that God has decided to put himself at the disposal of a covenant. Okay. If God says, I will not honor the covenant, what will you do? If you come and say, oh God, forgive me, God say, Kai, you too they sin. I don't ever want you near him. Get out of this place. What will you do? What can you do? And so when you see that God upholds the covenant, the new covenant, in ensuring that if a man confesses, he receives forgiveness, part of the things that should come into your heart is you should fear him. Say, Kai, this God. He introduces himself as a God that keeps covenant for thousands of generations. He doesn't have to. That's the point I'm making. He doesn't have to. He doesn't have to. Meanwhile, his forgiveness is predicated on his justice. He says he is faithful and he is just. That's how he forgives. So when I got born again, early, I was still struggling with sin because I was a very demonic, bad boy. Because people say I was doing witchcraft. No. But I was a very bad boy before I got saved. So even when I got saved, I was still struggling, and it affected my Christian journey for a while. For a few months, I would rise and fall. I would rise and fall. I just couldn't get a hang of it. I had no knowledge. And Satan used to afflict me, until the day I saw 1 John 1 verse 9. That day my life changed, because it's not that I stopped sinning. Is that I realized that if I sin, I can, which is what Satan does. Satan actually makes you feel like if you sin, you cannot come to him. Are you here? And I'm trying to let you know that your best version is with God. If you were with God and you sinned, and you think that the answer is to run away, what do you think you will be when you run away? You are with God, you are trying to honor God, and then you still sinned. Then God is no longer in the picture. You can never be better. And so what Satan does is to perpetuate the cycle of distance from God. Satan is really not interested in your sin. No, he's not. Satan is interested in your distance from God. And Satan can also sponsor that distance from God by wealth. He's not interested in your brokenness or in your wealth. He's just interested in that your life should spoil. So if what will spoil your life is brokenness, Satan will orchestrate more brokenness. If what will spoil your life is wealth, receiving dollars,